So this evening's yin class, I'm going to use just a block myself, but you could use a bolster, particularly for this first pose, child's pose. So I'm going to take that with relatively wide knees and allow myself to come down. So if you're going to use a bolster, that's going to be underneath your chest and your head, so you can rest all the way down. I'm just going to use the block underneath my head and the hands on top of the block. And that gives me a really nice position where I can start to feel my spine sinking down to the floor. The idea is to try and take the roundness out of the spine and just let ourselves settle for a few minutes. We'll be here about 3 minutes, enough time for it to be interesting, and the calves and the knees and the quadriceps. Maybe a chance to stretch out the glutes a little bit. And with the knees slightly wider apart, the belly hopefully can sink. And there's plenty of room for the diaphragm to expand and contract. I'm going to attempt to slow the breath down. We're not making it deeper. I'm just going to slow the breath, inhalation and exhalations. Hold the top and the bottom as naturally as you can, whatever feels right. And as you note, slowing the breath and slow the heart. And it can start to affect the mind as well. It starts to calm down a little bit. Inhale, lift up gently. We're going to come into Sphinx pose, so we can take the block forwards. Just walk the elbows out a little bit. Stretch the legs behind. We'll take them as wide as the mat allows. And just let the legs roll the heels out. I'm actually going to keep the hands together lightly. Elbows are underneath the shoulders. I'm going to let the shoulders roll back a little bit, letting the chest sink to the ground. Another way of explaining that is it feels like the shoulders are lifting up, reality staying exactly where they are. If you want to try and have that gravitational line running from your shoulder down through the elbow, through the arm, rather than forwards or backwards from that point, trying to let the lower back relax completely and across the buttocks. So giving a little bit of release into that sciatic nerve. Head position is entirely yours. I tend to keep my head up during this so that I can look at the clock. But since you don't need to look at the clock, if it feels good to let the head hang completely, then be my guest. It allows you to stretch into the shoulders, relax your back, the legs. More effectively, then that is the place to be. Very light compression into the discs, into the lower back. 3-minute hold, really good for the spine. Moving almost from yin practice to restorative. And moving on to our bellies. We'll take the arms or elbows particularly out to the sides, hands underneath the chin or the forehead, and bring the toes back together on the central line. And then from there, I'm simply going to draw my right leg out 90 degrees-ish and let the shin move out to the side. So it feels like it's following this line of the edge of the mat, toes pointing out. And some people find that pretty tricky on the inside of that ankle bone, if it's pressing into a hard floor, like a laminate floor would be. And if that's the case, I'm just putting a blanket up a couple of times underneath that ankle bone. It's perfectly okay. It'll just make it more comfortable and allow you to relax. So if you find an issue with your knee, you can pack that as well. And I'll try and let the groin open and the hips stretch out. So in our mind, maybe visualizing the hip just getting softer, opening up, letting joints stretch gently. A lot of people like to turn their head in the direction of the bent knee to the side. Again, something I tend not to do because I need to look up every now and again at the clock. No, it's not a comfortable position for me to do that on both sides. So I tend to work with the facilities that I have. And relax into the shoulders as well. Slide the leg back up. And a little wriggle out through the hips. Make sure you feel comfortable. Feel like the hip is returned and the spine feels like it's in a good place. And when you're ready, slide the opposite leg out. Take your foot out to the side. To admit that the floor is extremely cold. And you're wearing a pair of shorts, I haven't thought that one ahead. Oh, so those gritting the teeth and holding the breath is just purely the chill factor. Not feeling you're able to, but without feeling that issue yourselves. And then again, we'll slide the foot back on. We'll give that a little shake out. So have your feet about mat width again. And then you're going to lift up slowly into the Sphinx pose. I mean, this time we're going to take more sort of traditional approach with the forearms parallel to each other. The shoulders roll back a little bit. See how that feels in your spine. Now, if it does feel good, but you would like to put more compression into the back, then see if you can lift easily the elbows from the ground. If that feels tremendously intrusive into your lower back, affecting your breath, maybe gritting your teeth, raising your temperature a little bit, then you need to come back down onto your elbows. There is no prize for coming up higher, only like if you have a back that has very open discs, very open vertebrae, and large discs. You're going to find it very easy to lift up because you have the space. You don't have the space, then really what you're doing is trying to crush your spine a little bit, and that's not really what we want to do. Now, I find that I can sort of lift up a little bit more by just walking my hands in, and sometimes that can be 3 or 4 inches to maybe only an inch. It does depend a little bit on what you've been doing during the day and how your muscles are feeling. Again, we are trying very hard to relax the legs and the buttocks. It's very easy for us to get a little over competitive with ourselves and try and lift up. We want to feel like we're doing it properly. But the properly is not what it looks like. The properly is in how it feels. It needs to feel comfortable, like you're working. Still be able to breathe easily. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time there, just got a few more seconds. And then we're going to slowly let the elbows come back down. And bring the chin down to the floor. Let's bring the feet together onto the center of the line. Now, to come out of this, we're going to roll onto whichever side you find easiest to roll onto. Bring your knees towards you with your hands out in front of you underneath, and then just use that on an exhale to lift up. So you're not gritting your teeth or holding your breath. You're going to come up very slowly. You want to be careful moving from back bend into next postures. The next posture happens to be saddle pose. So I'm going to take my one block and put that portrait-wise down towards my heels. And of course, I bring my toes together. As I'm looking down at my knees, I'm just taking my feet out wider so I can just see them with a sort of peripheral view on the side of my legs. And then I pretty much know that as I sit back, my heels will slide up the side of my hips. That works very well in my body. You might need to do something different. But ultimately, we want to be able to sit here with the knees together and the ankles stretching out a lot, the toes pointing backwards, the heels just staying outside of the thigh, so getting a little bit of rotation in there. If one block doesn't do it, then you might need to use 2 blocks. You can put a brick across the side. But whatever you do, you want to have both the sitting bones supported rather than sitting on the coccyx. And then we can just sit tall and breathe. We try and relax the shoulders, have the head as neutral position as possible. Maybe even closing the eyes will help. Now, it's not unusual for those calf muscles to feel very tight in the ankles and the quads, and a big stretch in the joints of the knees. Hopefully, again, within a reasonable sense of control, and being able to breathe easily. Okay, so we're going to lift out of that. The next posture we're going to take is shoelace, which is a cross-legged seating posture. Now I know that I can do this sitting on a block quite easily with both legs crossed over. However, the half version of that would just be with the top leg crossed over the bottom. And if you're going to take that version, I would say just sitting directly on the floor, the way you would come into that. If you know you've got a bad knee, particularly on one side, maybe you would want to do this. You would just take the feet out in front, cross it over, and you want to get the thighs together and take the foot as close back towards the hip and out to the side a little bit as you can. So really you can't get a piece of paper through here. You want the pelvis to be able to sit up nice and tall, and generally I find if I rest my hands on top of that knee, everything's okay. Sitting on the floor, I don't overstretch the back of my knee. I sit on the block, the weight of the legs can push into the joint a little bit, and it's a bit uncomfortable. So I'm going to do this by just moving initially my block out to the side, because I'm going to place it underneath when I feel I'm going to sit back. So bring my knees together, feet together, in a classic tabletop position. And simply I'm going to draw my left knee forwards, cross that over. At this point I can start to squeeze the thighs together. I find if I rock backwards and forwards a little bit, I can kind of wiggle the flesh around and get that gap a little bit closer. Also take the feet. Remember, this is the version with two legs crossed over, so I'm taking both feet out wide to the edges of the mat. And then as I sit back very gently, I'm going to place the block with my sitting bones. Sit tall. I'll be here for a couple of minutes. And then we'll unravel and do the opposite side. So this is the classic seated shoelace pose. Once we've done this to each side, we'll do it again, but with the side bend. First 30 seconds can be interesting. And then you start to realize that you have really rotated the thigh bones around in the legs and the hip socket. And you're starting to feel some of those big, deep hip muscles stretching out. They're so powerful that they literally take half a minute or longer before they start to become more subdued and let themselves stretch. As simple as that. First side done. Going to lean forwards, fingers on the floor. Unravel myself. I like to move the block out of the way. It makes it so much easier to untangle the legs. If you want to, you can obviously give them a little stretch out. And then knees together again. When you're ready, toes touching. Tabletop position. Sliding the right leg through. Crossing over. Again, taking the option to rock backwards and forwards, squeezing the thighs a little closer. Also find I can sort of get a little bit more that rocking option as me to take the feet a little wider. And then when you're ready, you simply roll back. And obviously, if there's any sharp pains, in knee joints or ankles or hips, and you want to be moving back out. Always feel free to adapt the poses to your needs and make adjustments as you would need. Remember that one side of your body is not necessarily going to be the same as the other, so treat it with caution as you approach each side. Use the hands again to roll our way out. Second side. I'm just going to change position a little bit so it's a little easier to see what's happening. Again, just stretch out the legs. And when you're ready, walk out to the side. Knees together. Make the classic tabletop position. The left leg is going forwards, crossing over. Taking a breath. Taking the feet out wide. The rock backwards and forwards. And then place my block behind. Put myself down so both sitting bones are attached. And take the hands out wide. Going to walk over towards my left side, so away from the top leg. And take the top arm up. That might get a little difficult to hear as I bring my arm on top of my ear, because that's where the microphone is. I'm going to drop the hand over and down, so bend the knee elbow. The top arm is nice and loose. The chest is turned up towards the sky. Try to let this bottom shoulder find a nice position towards the back of the mat. And then if it feels comfortable, you can start to lean out a little more and take the bend into the elbow. You want to manage how big a stretch that feels in the legs and where it feels. I feel is particularly in my bottom thigh, and sides of the body and into the spine. Shoulder, not so much. Press away. So to lift up. Takes a little while for the sides and the spine to feel like they've come back to the center. When you feel ready to lift, using the fingers again. Then I move my block out. Tangle my legs gently. And stretch out. Very much needed and appreciated. And then knees come together again. This time, right leg travels forwards, crosses, go backwards and forwards. And it feels like everything's moved into the right place. Feet go wide and start to roll back. So to sit back down. And this time, unsurprisingly, right hand goes out to the side, comfortable distance. And take that top arm up. Lay the arm onto the ear and then bend the elbow. Relaxed hand just dropping down. And soften into the elbow. That's good. Now, if you have the bolster, you could actually bring that underneath your elbow and rest onto that. That can sometimes feel a bit more comfortable than resting down into the wrist. But you obviously need to be able to get down quite low for that to be effective. But if it's within your body's range, why not? Well, you know, it's time to take the breath in. Use that arm up, down. Start to take the weight into the head, fingers in, legs up to come back up. Untangle the legs. So I'm going to move back to position where front and back of the mat. Crossways. And I'm making sure that my block is now to the front of the mat because we will need it there eventually. Now you could move into a down dog and then into the lunge to take your begin with your dragon poses, but I'm going to come from this tabletop position and just simply bring my right foot forwards so that my knee is on my ankle, my hands are on the floor, my ribs are resting against my thigh. I'm going to tuck the toes on the back foot, just walk the leg out and let myself relax there. Letting the head hang if that feels good in the hips. I'm quite happy for the knee to travel forwards as far as it is able to go, but rather it didn't move past the toes. Might need to adjust the hands. Alternatively, if you are struggling to get the hands flat to the floor, you can come up onto the fists directly underneath the shoulders. You could use fingertips as well, but even higher. We're trying to let the body sink forwards and down. I'm going to lift up out of that. I find if I bring both hands onto the inside of that leg and pull the fingers and push the hips back a little bit, it's easier to untangle that leg. It brings me back into the tabletop position nice and easily. And then I can bring the left foot through in starting position. Exactly the same as before. You wiggle the back foot away, knees and knees down, onto the fists if that feels easy. And then let yourself sink forwards. Again, letting the head hang if that feels good. You might find that you pretty much travel forwards down the center line of the mat, or you might find your weight shifting out to the sides. So move the hands around to support yourself. That's where your body wants to go, then just let it. Yourself safe above all else. Bring the hands again on the other side. Walk myself back. Tangle the legs. Wriggle from side to side through the hips. And if you need the down dog to take the pressure off your knees, that's okay. You just want to slump to the floor and have shavasana for the rest of the class, that's perfectly valid as well. So the next pose I'm going to use the block again. This time from my tabletop position. I'm going to be a little bit further away from the front of the mat than I would be normally if I was doing sort of sun salutations and things like that, because I want to lean forwards a little bit, so I need the space of the mat to be ahead of me. I'm going to simply take the right foot to the outside of the right hand and then turning the block landscape-wise. I'm going to bring that more or less underneath my shoulders. So I want the edge that's closest to me just be sort of where my shoulders would be. I tuck the toes of the back foot and ease that foot away so that the knee gently come down to the ground. Then I'll tuck the toes. And from there, I'm going to allow the front foot to hang out to the side a little bit, sort of 45 degrees-ish, and let the knee hang out. And then see if I can rest down onto my elbows and let myself sink. So again, I want to make sure that you feel happy. So I've got the block underneath me, offset to the left side a little bit, probably 2 or 3 inches, so that I can get my elbows and my forearms onto the blocks to give me support. And obviously, if you need more blocks underneath, or you could pack up a cushion or a blanket and stick that underneath to give yourself that space. It's just about letting the hip open out, keeping the elbows and forearms comfortable. So if you've got cork blocks, you definitely need some padding of some sort to take the resistance and sharpness out of the elbows. You won't particularly be happy about resting on a hard surface. My blocks are not completely soft, they're pretty high density, but they have to have some give, just enough to take the edge off. Almost there, just a few more breaths. Good head, hang the head if that feels good. Look towards the front of the mat if that feels good. Okay, we're taking that backwards. So I'm going to move up, move the block out forward so it's easy to bring my foot through without restriction. Untangle. It's pretty big in the hips. Again, you might want to stretch out the legs a little bit on each side. And then when you're ready, you take the opposite leg forward. So left leg goes forwards. I've just about got my toes and the heel on the mat. Lift the back knee, wiggle the foot out as far as I can, get the knee down to the ground. Move my block in. Remember, it's something that both sets. You want the bottom edge closest to you of that block to be underneath your shoulders, and the top sort of more towards the head and the front of the mat. And when you're ready, sink down. Letting the front knee hang out. Let's see where we get to. Now, this is definitely one of those poses where I feel it differently from side to side. Very different hips in my body. I'm trying to let the pelvis sink to the floor. Just offering enough support through the elbows and the shoulders to stay in position. It is very deep pose into the hips. It's really strong. Tend to only take about a minute and a half per side actually in the pose. You could build up to tolerate more, but you'll be doing less posture. So the swings around that. So there's nothing wrong with doing an hour-long yin class and just adapting yourself into 5 postures, taking plenty of time to move in and out. Longer whilst you're there. As after all your practice. Take a last breath and use the hands to lift back up. Release the feet back. Now, I'm going to stretch the legs out just a couple of times. And then I'm going to take child's pose, but this time I'm going to take the knees together. And then I have the heels together as well. I'm simply going to sit down onto the heels and make sure I'm happy with knees, ankles, etc. And then I'm going to bring the forehead down to the ground. Now, I know in my body that I feel more comfortable if I bring that block underneath my head and take the hands towards my toes. So I want to be able to have my head resting against something. I can get my hands towards the back and that rest down through the shoulders without my bottom getting lifted into the air. Breathing is restricted. You're sitting on top of your diaphragm here. See if you can still keep a mellow, slow breath in and out. And then your diaphragm to stretch. And the spine out forward. Take a breath. And bring the hands forwards. And as those lift up very slowly. Okay, from here, we'll move the feet towards the front of the mat again. And use the block underneath the back of the head. Some people like to do this pose flat to the ground. Again, I use that mostly because I need to look towards the clock and it's less a strain on my neck. But it's more comfortable as well. Now, both knees high, hands behind. Use the strength of your arms, a little bit of your core muscles, and chin towards the chest. Roll the spine down towards the ground, and then either head on the block or the floor. Adjust your, sounds a bit specific, but adjust your waistband on whatever you're wearing so that it doesn't feel like it's pressing into the back of your pelvis or whatever the base of your spine feels like is pressing into the floor. You want it to be above and away from that. We're going to let the arms come out wide. Take a little breath and wiggle the feet together to the center line, knees still high. I'm going to slide my right leg out along the floor, trying not to lift it off the ground. And then once I've done that, I'm going to step the hips over towards the left, a comfortable distance, as scientific as that. We'll bring the left foot to rest directly on top of the right thigh. So the knee at that point is pointing upwards. Take another breath, and then we'll roll the hips and therefore the legs over towards the right side, keeping the shoulders flat to the floor. Now I'll take my right hand on top of that left thigh. Allow my foot to move from the thigh out to the side of the mat, sort of 90 degrees-ish. Basically what I'm trying to do is get the big toe to rest on the ground a little bit whilst my shoulders are flat to the floor. So looking for that rotation in the spine. You might actually find that you need to kind of wriggle it gently through the shoulders. So get the back down to the ground. Move some flesh out of the way. Slowly bring that left foot back, roll the hips to the ground, get the arms out wide again, move towards the center line of the spine, slide the right leg in, and then slide the left leg out. If you're down the center line, again, that little lift and jigging the hips to the right. Right foot on top of the left thigh, take a breath, roll it down and out to the side. Let the foot move out a little to the side so the big toe touches the ground. Again, using the left hand on top of that top thigh, wriggling the spine around as you need. in, lift our way back up. That's easy. Roll the spine back again. Give ourselves a wriggle out through the hips and the spine. I'm going to bring the feet back onto the center line. Draw the left leg in towards my body and take hands loosely around the shin or the back of the thigh. Now allow the right foot to inch its way down the center line of the mat using my toes until I can't do that effectively any longer, and then slide heel out. And I'm just going to let that leg relax completely. And also let the leg that is closest to me relax as well. See where that travels to. At the moment, it's making a rather alarmingly fast travel out towards the left side by an angle. Just dropping, dropping, dropping. The only thing I do ask is that do keep both hands around the leg rather than taking one-handed. Ease the leg back on the left side to the center. Bring the foot to the floor. I'm going to slide the right leg back in. Look at the heel in contact with the ground to really keep the nervous system relaxed and the back muscles soft. When you're ready and you feel realigned, allow yourself to draw the right leg. Take the hands across the shin or the back of the thigh. You're ready, walking the toes out. And the left foot. Ready to heel for that last bit. And again, super relaxed, letting the leg just rotate where it wants to and letting this right leg drift towards me in its own path that it wants to access. So I'm not really trying to pull, I'm literally just holding the leg and see where I get to. Still keeping the shoulders flat to the ground. And slowly bring that leg back. And that foot's going to come to the floor. I'm going to move into Shavasana. So just easing the foot towards the front of the mat. Sliding the heel out. And then letting the legs move as wide apart as the mat, as much of it as you wish to use. final little wriggle through and adjustments. We want to be super still, so we're going to get those little wriggles and chatter from the mind solved. And then as we exhale, eyes closed, jaw soft, we start to let go. Try to stay absolutely still. Small involuntary movements of the body. The echo of a voice telling us to scratch or move, to just getting in a better place, whatever it seems to be in terms of its urgency, is really not necessary to listen to. The body just needs to be still. Feel the breath move in and out of your body. Maybe feeling the heart in the chest. And letting your mind clear on down slowly. It clears a little. You start to stretch the fingers and toes and breathe a little deeper. Follow that by moving the wrists and ankles to bring the nervous system back into the room. If you're ready, allow yourself to stretch in any way that feels good to you. And if you haven't already, we'll one heel at a time along the floor. So you can bring each knee towards us. Take the hands lightly around the shins. Rock gently from side to side. And then on the exhale, on the next breath, I'll just roll completely to the right. Let the feet come down, knees come down. And just pull over to the side, chest turns in. And you can press away very easily, disturbing your spine or your nervous system or your breath. Sit up nice and tall. Close by bringing the hands to our heart. Taking a little breath in as we close our eyes. Begin to slowly exhale, letting the chin drop. And feeling the belly drawn to the spine, simply bow to the floor, sealing your practice for the evening. And inhale, lifting back up. And head lift and eyes open. Namaste. Have a great summer's evening. Joining. See you again on that seat.